4th of July was a big deal for me growing up. Every week we would go up to this kind of remote town in Maine to this rustic cabin that my great Uncle Steve and Aunt Ruth had built themselves. And we went up every year, and the 4th of July always started off with a literal bang, because we would be right where the beds were, our heads were right by the windows of this little cabin. And my Uncle Steve would bust out this super old shotgun that he had. And he would come up right underneath the window early in the morning and fire off that shotgun right by the window. My brother and I would just like leap out of the bed, and we knew it was coming every year, and it happened every year. And that just kind of kicked off the 4th of July, that then led into all kinds of fun, from horseshoes to happy hour and just fun and joy and family and friends getting together for this period of time. And then it led into dinner, which was hot dogs and baked beans, but not the kind, and don't get me wrong, I like a good baked bean out of a can, but not this kind, the kind with the old pot that would be made over days, made out of the beans that came from a line from the family farm that my great Uncle Steve's family owned over years. And then when it came to dessert, my mom always made the cake, and then she would make it into kind of a flag like this, and the stripes would be strawberries. Some of you have probably done this before, and whipped cream would be on there, and so the whipped cream would be the white, and then blueberries in the blue section, and with the whipped cream in there, it made it look like there were stars in the blue and all that kind of stuff, and it was fantastic. We put sparklers in there, and after the sparklers, Ron, we'd start singing the patriotic songs like America the Beautiful or the Star-Spangled Banner and all this kind of stuff, and it instilled in me, at a very young age, a sense of belonging to this country, a sense of pride in this country, a sense of wonder and understanding that I was part of something larger that I didn't fully understand, and as I've grown older have come to understand in a more sophisticated way, but gave me a true sense of belonging to something bigger than myself. And it was beautiful. It's beautiful. Look, and I still think America is beautiful, but I don't know about you, but right now America is breaking my heart. America is breaking my heart. It is this combination of beautiful and broken at the same time, and we may, in reasonable conversation, have a different opinion about how beautiful and how broken it is. But I think most of us feel that there is still beauty in America, but that there is this large brokenness and moving in the wrong direction right now. And the question is, people of faith, people trying to follow this God who is trying to have us faithfully follow in the words and the actions and example that God gives us, is to have us asking this question today, here, wherever you are, when you leave this church, throughout this week, throughout the summer, to ask this question, because I still believe that America has beauty in it. But the degree to which you see beauty and brokenness can depend on where you are in society, where you are in this moment, who you are in this moment, and who is under attack in this moment. And so the question to ask is this: America is beautiful for who? For whom is America beautiful right now? And what are we called to do for those for whom it is not? And what does God call us to do for everyone? Let's turn to the scriptures and see what is in store for us today. So we start in Deuteronomy. In Deuteronomy, just for context, see, this is kind of like early in the Bible, fairly early in the Bible. It's one of the first 5 books in the Bible. It's part of what's called the Torah, for those of you who are familiar with that, the most sacred scripture in all of Judaism, called the Pentateuch as well. Traditionally understood as written by Moses and the law of Moses and all the story of Moses and the early people in the story of Israel. We later have come to find out that there are many, 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 like dozens and dozens of authors here, but this is one of the 5 most important books to the people, to the Hebrew people, and therefore also one of the most important books to us as Christians, because there is no Christianity without Judaism. There is no Christianity without our understanding, appropriate understanding of these books as well. And it's very unfortunate because Deuteronomy is one of the most abused books in all of the Bible. This is one of the ones where you hear people pulling lines out and saying, these people are going to hell because of this, these people are going to hell because of this, you're in, you're out because of Deuteronomy. A lot of the times people are pulling things out of Deuteronomy, and it's used to divide. And therefore, that's because people have heard a lot of that kind of stuff. People think Deuteronomy is kind of like ugly, when the fact is, when you start to hear some of this stuff, this is more representative of the spirit and the heart of what God is trying to say in Deuteronomy. So let's hear a little bit of this first. So for the Lord your God, the Lord your God is God of gods and Lord of lords, the great God, mighty and awesome. So the Lord is a term that was being used to name God because they weren't allowed to use the term Yahweh. Right? So the Lord is a name for this particular God, and it says God of gods. Why? Because back then there were many gods that people worshipped, including the people of Israel. And a lot of the gods were aligned to land, so wherever you were in that particular time, and if you were wandering or if you were in one spot or another, there was a god associated with that land, literally the ground. And then this other one, and this idea that there was one God that wasn't associated with the land, that was everywhere, was relatively new to the people. So Moses has to clarify. See, Moses is defining who God is right now. Right, saying, I just want to let you know which God we're talking about. This is the God. So I'm defining God for you, letting you know who this God is and what this God is all about. And for your God is God of gods, Lord of lords, and a great God, mighty and awesome, and takes no bribe. Remember that one for a little while from now. Takes no bribe. See, they're defining who God is and what God is all about, and then it continues, right? It said, God of gods, Lord of lords, mighty, takes no bribe. We're still defining God right now. And who executes justice for the orphan and for the widow and the stranger, which in translation means someone who is not from your territory, meaning alien, meaning immigrant, legal or illegal. So God, in being defined as Lord of lords, God of gods, almighty, takes no bribe. And by the way, we're still defining God as the one who defends and protects the people on the margin. This is the definition of this. Now, I want to just take in a couple more verses that weren't read here a little earlier, because I think it adds some important context to this. And starting in verse 12, it says, So now, O Israel, what does the Lord require of you? You might say, well, wait, we did hear that. That was in Micah. So this is a consistent theme early on in the definition of God that later Micah calls out, reminding people who God is. So now, O Israel, we're still in Deuteronomy. Now, O Israel, what does your God require of you? To honor your God, to walk in God's ways, to love God, to serve God with your heart and your soul, and to do the things that God has asked you to do. Pretty straightforward, right? Pretty straightforward. But the last line in there, it says, for your own well-being. Doesn't say for sacrifice of yourself to help someone who is hurting. It doesn't say because you are going to have to do this in order to be good with God to help other people. It says you're to do this and follow this God who is defined by being great and above any other and all other gods, but who by definition is the one who defends the people on the margins. And it's not meant for you to do that just for them. This is going to be good for you, for your own well-being. Liberty and justice for all. This is where the concept came from in the United States documentation. Liberty and justice for all came directly from these principles, from this section of the Bible. Liberty and justice for all. The problem is right now the scales are not balanced. Right? There is no liberty for all. There is no justice for all. And freedom is the bringing together of liberty and justice. So when there is no liberty for all and there is no justice for all, there is no freedom for all. And remember what God says is this is not just for the people who are on the wrong side of this. This is about doing this for everyone, that this is in everyone's interest, the powerful and the oppressed, and everywhere in between. So how do we do this? And that's where we get to Micah, right? Because Micah puts a little bit more of a specific on what some of those commandments are that we're supposed to follow and what we're supposed to do. Now recall, here we go with Micah, with what shall I come before God and bow myself before God on high? Come with burnt offerings or calves or thousands of rams or tens of thousands of oils or give my firstborn? And by the way, this didn't mean offer them to the temple to serve. It meant as a child sacrifice because back then some of this was still going in some radical places in this region. But recall from Deuteronomy where it says God takes no bribes. God takes no bribes. And Micah is saying all these sacrifices that you were doing to try to get good with God, all of these ritual exchanges that you're trying to do to get good with God are valueless. Are valueless. Whether it is a small sacrifice or it is 10,000s of gallons of oil or all kinds of rams or whatever you give, it is valueless because God takes no bribe. Because God has told you already, folks, back in Deuteronomy, God has already told you, but let me remind you here, I will speak for God in this moment, says Micah. Let me remind you what God has in store for you, O mortal, what is good, which means what you're supposed to do. Remember, what does the Lord require of you? Quoting Deuteronomy. Back then, the people would have recognized that connection. What does the Lord require of you? But to do justice, meaning active in your life, honoring God by doing justice on a daily basis. And then some translations say to love kindness or to love mercy, but the actual translation is active, meaning not just to say, oh, we like being nice to people or we like forgiving people, but to actually do acts of loving kindness. Active work for people on the margins, and then walk humbly with your God. Now, I want to give a slightly different interpretation, a slightly more modern interpretation of this. Del, you put the first slide up, please? What shall I come before God? Shall I come with pledges of allegiance? With a patriotic song? Will God be pleased with scriptures in schools and a passionate defense of the flag? Will God be grateful if you go out and say, oh, we are fantastic and love it or leave it? Is that what God requires of you? No. No. God keeps telling us what is good. And what is it that God requires? To do justice for those on the margins, to do acts of loving kindness for those on the edge, to know we don't have all of the answers, so that we are humble and walk with God doing the work of love and justice together. Thank you, Don. The humble part is sometimes a challenge for folks in congregational churches. I'm not saying that people are arrogant, it's because of this. Sometimes we get so sure of ourselves on certain ideals that we believe to be right that we use our own ideals and our own ideas to go about doing the work instead of using this as our guide. When you do that, you risk being as wrong and doing as much damage as those you're opposing. Because it is, again, ignoring and not having the humility in saying that you or I have the answers. And that is the same thing that the people who you may feel are doing the wrong things are doing right now. The only grounding way to know that you are going in the right direction is to listen to these commandments, to listen to this guidance, because it is objective and it is clear and it is consistent throughout the Old Testament, from Jesus, and throughout the New Testament as well. And so what are we called to do? Anybody buying that I drew this? No, Morgan did it again this week, right? Morgan did the drawings again this week, which I am deeply grateful for. But here's the reality. Freedom doesn't start with the middle. Freedom doesn't start with the powerful. Freedom starts at the edges. That is where it is defined whether people are going to be free, whether we are free or we are not free, because when we are scared, we oppress the people on the margins. That doesn't mean we're free. That means we are scared of the people on the margins, so we put them down, and we are not free. Nobody's free when you're oppressing the people on the margins. And we, you, and I, and you, and other people who we talk to and beg to come in here so that they can have a sense of belonging instead of being lost out in a broken world, we have a choice to help when they're walking on this edge, to guide them to the light, to walk up this mountain, to be at the top together, or to push them off the edge. And right now, America is in the business of pushing people off the edge. You have never been more important. You have never been more important than being in this moment right now, helping people get this freedom, not just for the people on the edges. What did Deuteronomy say? What did God say? What did Moses say? Who was going to benefit if we did this? Yourselves. Everybody. This is a principle that the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King held, that Howard Thurman held, that Gandhi held, that so many of the great thinkers held. That the oppressors are freed when we free the people on the edge. And so I'm asking you to think about the following this week and beyond. How can you help mend the union? How can you help mend a broken heart? How can you help mend the broken heart of people and a country that is hurting? Not the ways you think it should be done, but listening to Deuteronomy, listening to God, listening to Micah, following the ways and examples of Jesus that give us a clear but difficult path, but complete clarity about what to do and how to do it. Because if you do this, if you listen to these commandments, if you listen to these rules, if you listen to these things and follow them and help mend the union, it will mend you. When we mend the union, it will mend ourselves. We, as a country, are moving away from freedom right now. We, as a country, are acting completely contradictory to the direction that God has clearly given us in the world. We have the opportunity to move this country toward a more perfect freedom, towards greater liberty, towards greater justice, towards greater joy. And make no mistake, in a moment like this, it is okay to be down, it is okay to grieve, but joy is resistance. Hope in a moment like this, and not giving into despair, which people are trying to impose on us. Hope is resistance. So have that hope that this is possible. Have this hope that these hands can be yours, mending people's hearts, mending communities, mending this country. Because that is what we are called to do, O mortal. To do the acts of justice for those on the edge. To do the acts of loving kindness for those on the margins. Using the Bible and God and the Holy Spirit and Jesus as our guide as we work towards building a more perfect freedom. Amen.